We have with us this afternoon Julia Golvis, who is who's the coordinator of the Farm to School program for the state of Illinois. Julie works for University of Illinois Extension out of the Chicago area office. So, Julia, are you with us and ready to go?
Okay, great. Thank you. Welcome everybody to Farm to School Sales, What's Involved. We're going to go through this and we'll have time at the end for any questions you may have. And before we begin, I want to make sure you know that in creating this webinar, where we are now is, as I mentioned, I was assuming that everybody who is participating is already involved in a farming enterprise and already is involved in direct sales and are interested in now expanding their markets. If that's not the case, please don't hang up. You'll still get a lot out of this. I just want to make sure that expectations were clear in that I'm not going to be going over basic farm business material. The goal of this webinar is to specifically familiarize you with what it takes to sell into schools. So Farm to School, a lot of people ask, well, what is it? And I'm going to tell you that the very basic essence of it is it contains three components. There's a cafeteria, classroom, and a community component. The cafeteria piece is basically all about procuring or sourcing local food for school meals, supporting nutrition education that occurs in the classroom. So many Farm to School programs will have school classroom curriculum that will align with what is being served in the lunchroom. In the classroom, this can be there's a lot of different curriculum available for classrooms, including school gardens, using school gardens as a learning environment, and having children see how seeds sprout, how things grow. Farmers visiting classrooms to give firsthand knowledge, and students visiting farms. All of this is part of it. So as you can see, as a grower, you have the potential to participate in both cafeteria, classroom, and then as well as the community. Communities generally embrace Farm to School programs for a lot of reasons. It's a way to support local businesses, and it's also a way to make sure that children are getting the freshest, healthiest food that is available. It's a great way for community members to become part of the process of a local community. And it also certainly helps to keep more dollars within a community. When you're purchasing products that are being grown right in your community, there's a multiplier effect of what then becomes available to circulate into that local economy. So as a grower, you might be asking, why would I want to sell into a school? And that's a good question. There are a lot of benefits to selling to schools. One of the biggest benefits is that you'll be able to reduce your risks because you're now diversifying your market outlet, increase public visibility. Generally, when schools do source from local growers, they tend to do quite a lot of media around programming on that because they like to highlight the fact that they are actually supporting local growers. Communities love to have farmers come and visit classrooms. Also, farmers can become very involved in school gardens as well, and field trips. So there's a lot of benefits of selling to school, and one of the things that I didn't have here too is that it serves as a guaranteed market. Once you've established these relationships with the school food nutritionist, you can generally start to continue to build on that relationship to the point where once it's established, you can actually work something out with them for future planting. So once you know what they want in the long run, you can have this program and it will grow and grow. You're not going to start out by selling them everything on your farm initially, and we're going to get into how you would go into it. That being said, there are certainly challenges involved in selling to schools, excuse me, just as there are challenges to selling in any marketplace, and now this is basically a wholesale market. So it's a different level. And of course here in Illinois, unlike our farmers markets that are generally open during the summertime, schools are open spring, winter, and fall, not the best time for all of our crops that are being harvested. So there's an issue of seasonality, there's an issue of supply, volume, food quality, food safety, packaging, distribution and transportation, how they're going to do it. And I'm going to just explain to you a little bit. When I speak to school nutritionists, and those are the folks that are the lunch ladies that are purchasing the school food, what they generally say to me is they would love to purchase from local farmers. They have no problem with it, but they want to make sure that I understand and the growers understand they have a limited budget to actually purchase school lunches, to make a menu out of a very small amount of product. That some of the concerns that have been voiced to me are that the reliability of quality, because they generally create their menus months to a year in advance, and if suddenly they're depending on a farmer's supply to fulfill that menu, and they find out a week or so beforehand that the crop didn't work out or something didn't happen, they won't have that supply, they're in trouble. So there's some reluctance in some of the conversations I've had to incorporate, until these relationships have developed, to incorporate local growing into full-scale menus. But that's okay, because it's not all going to happen at once. And this is actually a quote from the SNA, is School Nutrition Authority's website. And basically they see this as a change that is coming. These are the lunch ladies. This is a national organization. But I thought that this was very good advice. They're actually saying this to their school nutritionists, but I felt that this is a really good bit of advice for growers as well. Don't expect to just plunge into, if you're interested in selling to schools, that you're going to suddenly sell everything to schools all year round. That's just not realistic. It's not feasible. And in any of the states that are already successful and have very successful farm-to-school programs, that's not how it has ever started. And even though Illinois was one of the last states to actually have a formalized farm-to-school program, and we're really just getting started, I will tell you that I've learned a lot from the other states and my colleagues who are state leads around the country, in that how they started was very much easing into it. And over the years, they've become very successful at it. So what I wanted to do is just, you can read through this as I'm talking. I'm not going to read it verbatim, but what I want to do is just highlight some of the programs around the country that have been up and running a lot longer than we have in Illinois, and how some of these programs have gotten started and have gone on to become very successful. As you can see in New Hampshire, they focused on one item. So they all decided that apples was something that they could start putting into schools. They're available, shelf life is good, kids love them, and what was interesting is what they were finding out, and this is also the case with the Chicago Public Schools, and Michigan growers, is that a lot of times the smaller apples or the smaller produce in a lot of produce, not just apples, but the smaller pieces are actually preferable for children in schools. So a lot of times this is an additional market that growers hadn't even considered. In Oregon, what they did, and I think this is a really interesting piece, because when we look at farmers markets, and I'm actually right now down in Springfield at the first Illinois Farmers Market Conference, and it's really interesting because one of the speakers was saying this morning that, you know, farmers markets are food hubs. They really are. And so I thought this was really a good example of how folks use farmer markets to bring their produce, and then the farmer market manager then can create a relationship with the local school for school food buying, or and even the individual farmers can start to go in and talk to the school food authority, which we're going to get to in a minute. But it's a really good introduction. Also connecting, if you're already selling to a farmer's market, is a really good idea to connect schools in terms of having field trips to the farmers markets to give coupons in schools for families to come to the farmers market. That's also been a plus. A lot of states have also used, when making arrangements with their school nutrition authority, that when they have produce at the end of the farmer's market, rather than the farmers having to take it back, a lot of times the schools can access it fresh that day and then use it the next day, or so in salad bars, etc. Which brings us to California example, and I know we're not California. We don't have the seasonality. I mean, they have seasons working in their favor, and they also have a much more diversified production that we do here. But what they were able to do is arrange with the farmers markets to actually have the produce brought in, or the farmers could actually use that as a drop-off point for schools into their salad bars. And I will tell you, we are getting ready in Illinois to unroll a big campaign in collaboration with U of I Extension. This is going to be an Illinois Farm to School program. It's going to happen over the next couple of years. We're working with the Illinois Department of Public Health, Illinois Department of Agriculture, Illinois State Board of Ed, and a few other partners around the state to really promote a program about using salad bars, school salad bars, as a way to start getting local produce into our schools. And why that is a great entry point is, if you remember a minute ago when I was explaining that what I've heard and the feedback I've gotten from our school food nutritionists are that they don't necessarily want to start purchasing locally with the idea that it's going to be in full menus because of the concern about supply. So salad bars are an excellent way, and this has worked in other states as well, where if they're already using a salad bar in the school and they're already having fresh produce, when it's in season and when it's possible to purchase from local growers, they can actually feature that in the salad bar. So this is a great way, with very minimal resistance from the school food nutritionists, about how to get some of this local production in there. So keep your eyes out. We're going to be doing an announcement soon, but we're going to be having workshops across the states for schools as well as growers about how they might connect to this project. There's a national program called Let's Move Salad Bars to Schools, and we've actually become acquainted, and we've been working with that national organization. I did a webinar with Beth Collins from Colorado, who's the executive director, last fall, and at that time I said that I would really like to do an Illinois-specific program, because I really felt that this would be a great entry-level place for growers and schools to meet in the middle. So we've come to find out that a couple of other states have done just that, made very successful, focused initiatives that's really helped to increase local food, the market into local schools. It's been very successful. So now let's get to the main point. How do you sell to schools? Well, there's a couple ways. You can sell directly to the school food service director, and I'm going to interchange the words school food service director, school food authority, and school nutritionist. So I don't mean to confuse folks, but they're called different things at different schools. But basically, anything that I say school food, that's the same person, and that is someone who is purchasing the food and making the menus. So that's one way to sell to schools. The other way is through a food service provider, or through the wholesaler who distributes to the school. So let's talk about the first one that I mentioned, selling directly to schools via the school food director, school food authority, school food nutritionist. The pros from a grower point of view is that you will get the larger percentage profit retained because there is no middleman in the scenario. There's a guaranteed market once it's established. You increase the public visibility in that the school can do PR and newspaper reports about we buy from farmer Dan down the road, and it's good public visibility for your farm. And also just the Know Your Farmer, Know Your Food initiative. It really allows for the connection between the local grower and the local school. And also when you do sell directly, there's much easier traceback or feedback that you can get from the customers and correct anything that you need in your packaging or growing, etc. The cons are, well, the main one is that it can be daunting to have, you're already growing, you already know that that's more than a full-time job, and sometimes this is an extra piece of the material that you weren't really counting on. So let's look at the pros and cons of selling to the school via food service provider or wholesaler. So less time is required to address the school cafeteria regulations because you're just going to work with a wholesale buyer who's going to buy from you. You probably won't even know which school it's going into most of the time because they're probably mixing quantities from different farms. They can aggregate, so therefore when we do get to the point where the school food nutritionist wants to buy enough volume that will allow her to put things in a menu, she doesn't have to worry. There's going to be enough. The cons are, again, you have now a middleman. They're going to want to get the lowest price possible so that they can make their profit. And it can switch. The relationships aren't always as stable as when you get to know the school food person directly. So let's say you want to try the first scenario. You want to sell directly to your local school. How do you know if they can? Well, it all depends on that person, the school food service director, nutritionist, and because that is the person who runs the cafeteria. That's the person. You don't need to speak to the principal. I mean, you can, and they might steer you to that person, but what you really want to do is contact that person who is in charge of purchasing for schools. Now, if you're in an area where there's a lot of schools, there's probably one main person for the entire school district. And if you're in a more rural area with less dense population, you could have a school service director, food service director at each school. So it would really be a case of actually going and contacting the school to find out who is in charge of that. We are actually we are in the process of getting that data, and that data all online, so we'll be able to access through our Farm to School website. You'll be able to look up where a school and find out who that contact person is, but we do not have that at this time. I'm just going to quickly go through these slides just so you understand that school food funding is a complicated scenario and why it would seem so perplexing. As you can see, they really have a tight budget to create a school meal, and this isn't the most current reimbursement, but you can see how it's very little is allowed actually to purchase or to make a school lunch for a child. And generally, you have three sources of funding that helps pay for those lunches. You can see here there's federal funding, which there's free, there's reduced, and there's paid meals. The states can match it, and actually that's a 6-cent match for free and reduced price lunches this time. But there's also the paid meals, catering, and contracting. How a school purchases is very interesting. Most all schools receive some type of federal reimbursement for their meal programs. But as you can see, they have to, you'll hear the term quite a bit when a school goes out to bid. And what that means is that they can't just go and purchase whatever they want without checking prices and other availability because it's federal reimbursement is taxpayer money. They also have to be able to prove that they're participating in open and free competition and not favoring their brother or uncle down the road. And in order to do this, when a school goes out to bid, they can either use the formal bid process or the informal bid process. And just recently, the threshold for the small food purchases was increased from 100,000 to 150,000, and this is an important piece for local growers, and we're going to get into this more in a minute. So the small purchase threshold, as you can see here, it was just changed in September. They've increased it from 100,000 to 150,000. So what that means is it has actually made the process for schools to acquire food items that are less than 150,000, which in Illinois I'm assuming most of our purchases or school sales with produce at the current time would be under that threshold. So it's a simplified paper trail that has to be done by the school. This just makes life a lot easier. It also makes local school nutritionists a lot more likely to want to work with local growers because it's not as much of a complicated situation as when you have to do a formal bid process. So a formal bid process then would be when a school has to purchase, and some schools can buy like a whole year's supply at one time. When a school goes out to bid, it could be that they're going to buy the majority of the bulk of their products for the year. And if they're going to do it that way, they're going to do a formal bid process. It's going to be more than $150,000. And they have to put out what's called an RFP, request for proposal, and they're going to ask for the public to send sealed bids. So this is generally for distributors and large commodity products as well as fresh fruit and vegetables. The informal bid process is a lot simpler, as I mentioned. They still have to show that they have gone out to try and source more than one, but it's a lot less of a complicated system. Also, the way a school can put out a solicitation, as you can see there, they cannot say anything like they will only accept locally grown products. That's just considered not fair trade, but they can give preference to some, which I'm going to get into. Let me get back to this for a minute. So say you go, let's look at that for a minute. Say you go to a school and you say, I've got these apples that I want to sell. And the school wants to buy them, and they say, yep, absolutely great. So they could show that they just tried to find something comparable. And if there's not a lot of growers around, they at least just have to have documentation that they have tried to source from other avenues. So what school food people can do, and this is being really encouraged to with school food purchasing, is to show, even though they're not allowed to say we only accept or we only want locally grown, they can apply what's called a geographic preference. So that means they are allowed to give additional points in a point system when they're going to choose who they're going to buy, say, their apples from. And I'm going to get into that. So what they can do is they can put bid points, and we're going to do a sample bid here in a minute. But a school, and this is up to each individual school, and we're also working with schools in Illinois to make them more aware of the power that they have in these agreements, or how they decide they're going to do these agreements, how much they can actually facilitate local purchasing. So it's up to them, but they can put all these additional points in that people can add toward the final bid. So let's just do a sample bid here for a minute. This is actually came from Wisconsin, and it's a bid where they said Champion Schools is accepting bids for apples. They put down their minimum specs of what kind they want, what amount they want, how it should be. They noted the price, the available varieties, location of the orchards, And they also included in the bid process. So they actually gave additional points to growers who were available to visit the school or educational activity or host a field trip. So schools can do that. I don't know of any in Illinois at this time that have gotten this far along with their geographic preference bid process, but this is just Wisconsin, which is just one of our neighbors. So we have grower A, and you can see what he did, grower B, grower C. So if you look at that, it's all different, location. Just quickly skim that, see what each one is available to do, and then we're going to see what happened. So the scoring process went like this. They have the school determine that these were all points that they could give to the growers. And so what they came up with is that grower B, and I see my numbers got off the chart there, sorry about that, but grower B was able to make additional points because he was available to visit the school or host a field trip, because he was located within 50 miles of the school. He gained an additional 10 points where grower C was further away. So there's all sorts of different things that school districts can use to actually be able, for this bid process, to say, yes, we did due diligence and we went out to bid for these apples, and we are going to buy it from grower B because he met all the criteria and won the bid through a scoring process. Here's another example of how it could be, say you have three different, somebody goes out to bid, there's, as you can see with this bid, there's only one who meets the geographic preference. So let's just say bidder 1 is from Iowa, bidder 2 is from Illinois, bidder 3 is from Michigan. So if that school has put the 10-point mark, if they've decided that what they call geographic preference is within their own state and they're going to assign it 10 points, as you can see, even though bidder 2, he actually would win the bid because he's gotten 10 points off of it, even though it's 197 is in Wisconsin. So it's an interesting situation, and like I said, I'm only doing this so that you can understand what you're up against or what you will be hearing in terminology when you hear the school say, we're going to go out to bid. So now let's move on and say if your school is not willing or able to buy directly from local growers, you can ask that school nutritionist when you contact them if they would be willing, if they are interested in still supporting local growers, then would they be willing to provide you with the contact information for the distributor she purchased from or she or he purchased from, and then you can contact the distributor directly. And here's what you will find out. If you go to your school and they say, I'd love to buy something from you, but I can't, we have a meal service contract. So there's two ways schools can operate. They can either be self-operating or they can have a meal service contract. So in that scenario, the meal service contract, and this is usually in larger metropolitan areas. For instance, Chicago, they can only purchase all the food that they serve in the CPS schools is run through a company called Chartwell Thompson. Chartwell Thompson has a contract with the Chicago Public School District for a number of years, and they do everything from hiring and training their lunch or their cafeteria staff. They do the procurement. They're in charge of everything to do with food. That you generally find this way, this scenario or this method of school lunches, like I mentioned, in large districts where it would just be unwieldy to try to do it. Chartwell Thompson is a huge company that's part of the Compass International Group, so it just makes it a lot easier for a district as big as Chicago, and there are many others around the state of Illinois who also have worked with meal service contracts. Another one would be a self-operating cafeteria. That means the school vendor can purchase from whoever and whenever. They don't have a contract. They can buy from different growers, different vendors, and it's much more open, and those are the people that you're going to want to speak with. Another thing that I want to make very clear is that another option for you once you get in and you meet with the food service director is the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Grant Program. So this is a national program that these federal dollars come through each state, and by the way, this is over $4 million a year that comes to the state of Illinois, federal funds. In this last school year, over 400 schools applied for this program, and 215 schools got it. So 215 schools in Illinois actually have this federal funding that comes in, and they have to, at a minimum, give children two times a week some fresh fruit or vegetable as a snack. So this isn't in the lunchroom. This is usually an afternoon snack. And when I did an initial survey trying to find out, well, what are they buying? Who's using this? We found that most of that money, of those federal dollars, are coming into our state and immediately leaving because folks are not using that money to purchase locally. So we are trying to do some education around that in school cafeterias. We obviously know we're never going to grow bananas, pineapples, or star fruit, but we can certainly get some local purchasing going on, which would keep that money in our state. So the next thing you want to do is there's a program called, if your school doesn't want to sell directly, or if you don't want to, buy directly, or you don't want to become involved directly and you want to grow bigger, we have a contract. Each state has what's called a DoD vendor. DoD stands for Department of Defense. And the Department of Defense has something to do with school lunches, which seems really bizarre, but the reason they do is because they have the capacity and the infrastructure to do the bookkeeping because they're used to handling food, large volumes of food for troops. So that the USDA contracted them to be a vendor for our fresh fruits and vegetables for our schools through the DoD program. So again, these are federal dollars that people can use. If you remember that one thing where I showed the 3 different ways monies come in, this is federal dollars. And each state has a DoD representative. In our state, the current contracted vendor is Performance Food Group, and all the information is right there if you care to contact them and sell to this vendor. Now they do try to, they told us they will try to highlight local folks and their farms as a way of selling it. So that's another option. Now we need to talk a bit about food safety. And if you look at that, I get asked this a lot. Is there a federal law that says you have to have these things? No, but I will tell you that most schools, most vendors won't even won't go much further with the discussion unless you are already GAP audited, third-party audited, or you've already done the training. You have a safety plan that you can show, and that you're willing to move forward into the third-party audit. We're really excited. We're going to be piloting something in Illinois in conjunction with Primus Lab. They've developed a safety plan program for smaller farms, and then we're going to have more about that in the near future. But it's a great way. It's not intimidating. It's a great way to get what you need in terms of a safety plan that will assure your buyers you've done everything you can to provide safe food. I said I really wasn't going to get into basic farming issues, and I'm just going to briefly say that the insurance issues become a bigger deal if you're, for instance, going to host field trips. This is going to be an important thing for you to consider. And also, if you are selling to schools, most vendors or distributors will tell you, they'll set a price and say you need X amount of dollar liability insurance for us to purchase from you. Schools, not necessarily. They may not know. So it would be in your best interest to discuss with an attorney in the school or the vendor to see first what the requirements are, but then also find out what would be the safest amount that you should carry. Again, every situation is different, so it makes a lot of sense for you to consult with an attorney and an insurance agency to figure out how much, depending on the volume that you're going to be selling. So, how should you decide if you want to sell to schools, if it makes any sense for you? Well, I found a really interesting project or a system that came out of University of Kentucky. There's a website there. And by the way, I would be more than happy to to email everybody a copy of this because there's a lot of information you may want to keep and use as reference. But Tim Woods and Steve Isaacs out of University of Kentucky came up with a system, and they called it Primer. And this is a great way to determine if you want to do it. So using the letters in Primer, P-R-I-M-E-R, they said these are the questions growers should ask themselves before determining whether it makes sense for them to venture into a new market. So these are some of the things that you have to determine, whether it's going to make sense for you to sell into this market. You know, that's really the price breaks. I get asked a lot, well, what is the price point break? And I'm going to tell you right now that that if you're going to sell to a vendor, that's going to be just what the current prices are, and that's going to have a lot to do with, as you know, supply and demand, weather factors, what's out there. When you work with a school directly, you will find more times than not they want to work with the grower to support the local production. So they're going to be a lot more flexible with what they can spend, even though we know that they don't have a lot to spend. They're not going to fluctuate as much. Once you've established a relationship with your school food nutritionist, you will be able to do that. Again, is it a long-term investment? Absolutely, if you develop this relationship. Resources is the enterprise adaptable to your area. All I can tell you is that we've got the data. We've done surveys in the state. We have more demand, obviously, than supply. There is no doubt that there are folks throughout the state that would like to purchase directly from growers. If any of you are familiar with the Illinois Food, Farm, and Job Act, the goal of that was that by 2020, all state institutions would be purchasing 20% of their food supply from local. And those are hospitals, state-run nursing homes, prisons. They set the school barrier, and I'm not sure why, but that the goal for that is 10% by 2020. So, and there's a lot of folks out there that really want to try to make that happen in their purchasing. So there's definitely a lot of people that are interested in this market. I suggest strongly that if you're not already working with your local extension office, I would connect with them. They can help you with everything from the marketing plan to the food safety issues. Again, these are more questions you need to ask yourself. There's a lot of research and development that is already available on our website. Marketing. So in marketing, most of what it's going to take is for you initially is to go and speak to your local school. And my job actually is I facilitate a lot of that communication. So if anybody's out there and they would like to know, could I make an introduction between their local school or district, I would be more than happy to do so. If you contact me directly, and my information will be at the end of this presentation, but I would be happy to, and kind of also bring some tools to the table to help the conversation along between yourself and the schools. A lot of folks that I talk to who are growers, one of the biggest things and what the enthusiasm that I hear is that, especially when it's a school where their own children or their own grandchildren or nieces and nephews are attending, that's a key component to the enthusiasm that I hear from growers in terms of wanting to be more involved in school food production. Again, risk is an important piece that you'll need to look at. These are all pieces that we're not going to answer in this 1 hour, but certainly there are folks at your extension agency who can help you with a marketing and a business plan. So the next thing I want to do is show you, and this is from the School Nutrition Association. So this is the national organization. We also have an Illinois School Nutrition Association, but this is from the national. I just want to give you a snapshot of what they share as the most purchased products. Obviously, we're kind of not in the running for the bananas or the strawberries, bananas or the pineapples, but we can certainly do grapes and apples. These are some of the vegetables that are most purchased. And I'm not suggesting that you go right into a freezing component. This is just the data, the raw data from the national organization. These are what schools are purchasing the most. Now this is a little bit going to be more interest, I believe, to everybody on this webinar, and this was actually done in Minnesota. They're actually further along with their farm to school and their infrastructure for local growing. Again, they have more diversified production at this time than we do, but this chart shows the percentages of districts that are already using them, what's been successful, what hasn't, and what the most requested product from local growers has been. So I think this is especially important to look at, to think about if you're already growing this product, or if you're thinking about it. These are the ones that schools in Minnesota are purchasing the most. And I would assume ours, we haven't done this next level of survey yet in Illinois, but I'm fairly certain that ours would mirror this one. I mentioned a lot of resources. We have a lot of resources before you. If you're not already selling directly to markets, I would suggest very strongly that you check out these two great resources. Illinois Direct Farm Business. Rich Shell has written the article here. We've got a lot of great folks at U of I who can help you, as I mentioned, make that decision. So what I'm suggesting is that when you do go to speak to the school food nutritionist, and again, I'd be happy to help liaison that introduction, but I would prepare yourself with the following. If you have a business card, create a one-pager with a profile of your farm, description of your product, delivery methods, and some of the other services you might be interested in performing, as well as your invoice. Now this is just a sample letter of introduction. You could create something like this and either put it in the mail or take it to the local school and drop it off and ask that it go to the school nutrition director, and then say, add that you would like to follow up with that person, or you will, and then if you're going to drop it off at the school, you could get the person's name and contact information and follow up the next week. But this is a really great way to introduce yourself to your local school food nutritionist and start the conversation. This is something else you might want to consider. It's just like some of the things that you have available. You don't have to start with this, but it would be an idea for you to start thinking about how you might give them the schools a product availability list. What do you grow? What is it going to take for your price break to make it make sense? Now, I mentioned I suggest that everybody get GAB audited, certified. We do have some cost share initiatives in Illinois that make it very affordable. This is while you're doing it, even if you wanted to get going and you're planning on getting that, I would strongly recommend that you have in place something like this, which is from Iowa State, that just shows that you have some standard practices that you follow on your farm in terms of safety. This is a sample contract that you could use basically once you've had a couple meetings with the school food nutritionist in the district or the school, that you can share and have them look over, make sure that they're comfortable with it. But these are just examples of what have been used in other states and by other growers to help them with the transaction. I get asked a lot of folks think that farm to school is only about fruits and vegetables, and it is not. Farm to school is also program schools purchase local meat, dairy, egg, as well as value-added processed foods. It's sometimes more difficult to get into the meat selling to the schools because schools can buy commodity, use their USDA commodity dollars to buy from larger surplus meat supplies, but there is still quite a bit of interest in a lot of schools to support local growers in that way. Lots of folks are interested in doing school field trips. There's a lot of great connection between that if you are going to get involved with schools to be able to host something like that. And like if you remember how we did showed the sample bid processing, how that can really go a long way in creating more connection with your local school. Again, you'll have to determine whether the cost of the liability insurance coverage is not so cost prohibitive that it makes sense. Most of these places obviously charge for the schools to come. And on this link, which is at the bottom here, and again, we'll send this PowerPoint to everybody. This is a guide that I put together last fall, and I'm going to be updating this, but it's for Illinois school farm field trips. So I went through the Market Maker database, and I combed through all of the Illinois farms who do any kind of agritourism and said that they would be willing to do school trips. And so please go on there and see that. And if you're interested in having your farm listed on the next publication, please contact me for that. We want to talk about some other things that might be helpful. I put a few links up there that'll help you in terms of what you need for your on-farm post-harvest needs. A big thing that we're told by schools and retail folks is that the shelf life, there's been some problems with the shelf life from buying locally because the field heat wasn't properly removed. Again, we do training through extension on these methods. We are going to be hosting, in conjunction with the Farm Bureau, some Meet the Buyer initiatives for people interested in selling to schools. Also consider working with your neighbors. It's a great way to create the supply, to aggregate what you have in conjunction. Maybe go together, find out what your neighbors are growing. Like if somebody's growing one thing, you're growing another. Maybe together, those are both items that would be of interest to a school. In a salad bar, that'd be a great way to campaign and work with your neighbors on that initiative. I mentioned GAP training. We have GAP training available through U of I Extension. We're going to be having our guests from Primus Lab and their new simplified farm safety plan that'll be coming out this spring, so watch your extension newsletters. And also make sure you check out the Illinois Farm to School website, which is on the University of Illinois Extension main page. So I'm finishing up a couple of minutes early.
We've still got a few more minutes to go, folks. If you have some questions for Julia, please post them on the chat box here. We'll try, and we can get to them.
The question from Pam, yes, there are schools who are interested in purchasing herbs directly from farmers. Again, I might have mentioned that we're in the process of we're sending out a survey directed to the school food nutritionists, which is going to give us all the data in terms of who has the ability to cook from scratch, who's self-operating, and what are some of the products that they would be interested in sourcing directly. I have heard, though, interest in purchasing fresh herbs, yes. I'm not sure what you're meaning about husking sweet corn qualify as processing. You mean in terms of the regulations and licensing, or yes, as soon as you change anything from even slicing apples, it's a different process. and I would be happy to get you those regulations. I can send those out as well from the state of Illinois. But definitely sweet corn is something that is of interest to schools. Corn on the cob, as you can imagine, is a wonderful thing. They use a lot of corn in recipes, fresh corn on the cob, sliced off the cob for salad bars. So yes, definitely, and I will be happy to get that information for you, is what qualifies as processing. As far as schools showing a preference for organic, there are definitely some that would prefer organic. Again, it comes down to a price. We have found a lot of the private schools and earlier education schools are buying organic, and there are a couple of distributors who are only purchasing organic. There's Organic Life, there's Gourmet Gorilla. I'd be happy to pass on as well. But the majority of schools at this time are just, they're trying to get local. And, if they can get organic as well, they'd be thrilled. If you're currently selling at a farmer's market, again, I would definitely encourage you to talk to the market manager about making the relationship for you with the local schools. It can be a great vehicle for folks who have product left over. Yeah, freezing that's really exciting to know about the zucchini bread. By the way, when this preference or wanting folks to do fresh local, there's some forms of processing that are allowed that still allow it to be called fresh local, and fall into that category. Canning is not one of them, but freezing is. That's considered a processing that can still be used in that language.
Well, thanks again, Julia, for an informative webinar this afternoon on Farm to School. I think we all learned a little bit about what the Farm to School program is, and appreciate your sincerity in sharing it with us. That's it for this afternoon. Thanks again for listening.
Thank you. Bye-bye.